Hi, I'm Chris Ralph, and we're going to take a look at some things today. I recently was out in the Nevada desert and found an area that I'd never seen before that was worked for placer gold, and this actually is a part of it. Now, I went out there and explored around, but we're going to take a look today at what you need to know to how to select the right place to start prospecting. If you were out in a place like this, where would you start? Where would you start dry washing or metal detecting or wherever? We're going to talk about just that. And we're going to start with my example and talk a little bit in the video about that. And then we're going to get started with how to pick a place to set up your prospecting.
Well, hey, I'm Chris Ralph, and I'm back with you guys again. Some of you guys really enjoyed my video on hard rock and pocket gold, and I've got to tell you that I've found a new spot. This is a place I've never been to before, and I don't know if anybody else has ever heard of either. I got to tell you how I found it. The reason I'm coming to you from inside my car rather than out in the field is because it's super windy. It's not going to be a good day for prospecting. I've already been out there a little bit. I haven't found any gold yet, but this is a really good looking spot. And I will get some videos for you of showing me out there metal detecting and stuff. There's no trash. It's really clean, although there's a lot of diggings and a lot of bulldozer work that's been done here. What really got my interest, I got to tell you the story, because I've emphasized in one of my other videos, and I'll put a link to it at the end of this, how important research is. If you go to the well-known places that everybody else has already hit real hard and worked real hard, you know, you might find some more gold there, but the really great stuff is going to be already gone. And I'm out at a new spot, a place that I don't know if anybody's ever really heard of, and I'm really optimistic that I'm going to find some gold here. The deal is, the research that I did, I had known for a bunch of years that somewhere out here in this region there had been some placer mining, but this is a big area. I mean, literally, it's maybe 20 miles by 10 miles. And that's 200 square miles. And so if I tried to go out and look for placer workings out in a 200 square mile area, it'd be literally like looking for a needle in a 200 square mile haystack, which didn't really interest me that much. So I was doing some other research, and I just happened upon an interview of an old timer who talked about mining in this area. Now, there's some other mines, and he talked about those too, but he did talk about the placering that was done in this area. There wasn't a lot of it, but he said that it was in a certain little area, and he gave enough descriptive clues that I could find the needle, you know, that I could trace it down. With what I knew about the area geology and what he said, I could put them together and end up with the right spot. And so here I am. I was able to find the right spot. But one of the exciting things that he said about this area was that he said it was a seam diggings. Now, seam diggings is a term more often used to describe places in California, but what it is a place where there's little veinlets, small veins of gold that maybe are mostly barren, but make pockets, like I talked about in the video with hard rock and pocket gold. That's what seam diggings are, is they're rich little pocket spots that you know, it's not really usually very economic to mine it with hard rock mining. In the old days in California, some of these seam diggings where the material had been weathered deeply down, they were able to go in with hydraulic mining and just, you know, all the bedrock had been weathered, and so they just washed whole sides of hills away and ran them through sluice boxes, and whatever pockets of gold were in there, they were able to get in their sluice box. I have a friend who was up in that same general country a few years ago and found a little pocket of just the most spectacular crystalline gold. I think I have a few photos. I could show you a photo or two. Yeah, that kind of stuff sells for a lot more than the price of it sells for a lot more than the price of the bullion and the gold, because of the beautiful crystals. Collectors will pay more for that. But anyway, the old timer that described this area said that it was seam diggings, and there was some really high grade gold that was taken out of here, but most of it was pretty low grade. And that, you know, goes right along with seam diggings. And so I was excited to find this place and to come out here. Now I've had about an hour or so of hunting around trying to find something, and even though there's workings here and there, there's hardly any trash, almost nothing, which is great for detecting. It's nice to go out and not be digging bits of tin can and bullets all over the place. But I haven't found any gold yet. But this place is so good looking that I'm going to spend some time here. I've gone to places in the past where it looks really good and the description is good, and maybe the first day I didn't find any gold, but after, you know, being persistent and sticking with it, then I got onto some good gold. So I think this place falls into that category, and I'll let you see some more. But unfortunately today the weather is kind of crummy. We're getting high winds. It's forecast to get up to over 35 miles an hour. So, you know, that makes for rough detecting, metal detecting, because that's what I'm doing out here. I'm going out and using my metal detector. The geology of this place, kind of interesting. It's the slope of some hills going down into a valley, and but the material coming sloping off the hills is really shallow. It's called a pediment. A lot of times in Nevada, you know, the material sloping off the side of the hills will be 20, 30, 50, even 100 feet deep in gravel. Whereas the gravel is really only a foot, maybe, or less. Some places only a few inches. And so that's the kind of stuff that makes for great seam diggings. You know, if it's covered over with a few inches of gravel and there's a rich pocket of gold in there, I'm going to see it with my metal detector. So I'm going out over this area with metal detecting. Unfortunately, like I say, the weather is not a good day. They're predicting 35-mile-an-hour winds. And when the wind gets up that high, the problem is the whistling of the wind, even if you're using headphones, just the wind whistling over your body and through your headphones and everything else, you just hear, you know, you just hear that kind of loud noise. And you know, it's not really good for detecting any kind of faint signals that you might go over. You're just not going to hear them. So that's it for now, but I will get back to you and let you know how this place turns out, because even if I don't find anything today, I will be back, and I'll come back when the weather's nicer and film some more of me detecting around the area, and I'll talk more about the area and the geology, and you'll be able to pick up on it and get some good information how to hunt desert pocket areas for yourself. And hopefully I'm going to find some nice gold. So I'll attach that to this part of the video. This will be the opening. Hi, I'm Chris Ralph, and I'm back at my secret spot that I told you about last week. And I just wanted to show you some things. I've been actually detecting around for about an hour, and I haven't yet found any gold, but there's definitely signs of old timer workings, and this is something I'd like to show you so that when you get out in the field, you can see the same things and notice them. Now, this is a desert type of environment, and you'll see behind me there's a little drainage that's going down this way, and behind me there's stacked rocks. Those rocks were purposefully pulled out of the creek bed and stacked there to get them out of the way so that the old-time miners could dry wash this gully. And actually you can see right there, there's a pile of coarse rocks and then a pile of finer rocks, that the finer stuff is more spread out. That's an old tailings pile. That's something that would have been dry washed probably in the 1930s. And so I'm coming out here, and it doesn't look like anybody's been out here with their metal detector other than me. There's also some dry wash coarse and fine right there. And there's little piles of dry wash up and down this creek. And so it's actually got some real good signs like it's going to have some gold. So I'm real hopeful, but as yet all I found is a few pieces of trash, bits of wire, and that kind of stuff. But that's what prospecting is about. When you get out and find new places and make new discoveries and find places that somebody else hasn't already been there. And this place, I go up and down here, I don't see any signs of any other dig holes. So when you get to a place that nobody else has been, you have your best chance of making a big strike. And that's what prospecting is all about, is getting some good gold. And I just wanted to share that with you so that you could get out. When you get out, you could see these sorts of things yourself. When you get into a drainage that you see larger rocks thrown off to the side, you see piles of coarse and fine sitting right next to each other, and then you know, you might see bedrock along the creek that they've dug out. And so that'll tell you that this area was worked hard by the old timers, and usually they didn't put in that much work unless they were getting some gold. So good chance that there's some decent gold here. I just got to find it.
So here is the area that I was at. This is an obscure little area that was not really known by many people to have produced some placer gold, but yet here you can see the obvious signs of old timers digging. Now, I will tell you that after watching those videos that I just put up, that I searched this area thoroughly with my metal detector and was not able to find any gold. Now, that's unfortunate, and I may go back out there again, but I've got a good number of hours in checking this around, and I don't know how coarse or fine the gold is out there. We'll just have to wait and see what it comes up to be. Now here's something that you can see by looking at this. You can see that on the left-hand side here, there's some dry wash tails, both the coarse and the fines of the dry washer. You can see that the old timers pulled out rocks out of the drainages and tossed them to the side. And then in the distance, more dry wash tailings, more coarse and fine, and more rocks that were tossed out of the gut of the drainage to allow them to dig and dry wash the material. So there's clear signs of working here, and that's what you need to be able to read to effectively go out and test these kinds of areas with your metal detector, dry washer, high banker, or whatever. This is a desert location and there's not any water, so you're going to probably be dry washing your metal detecting. And we're going to take a look at both areas in the mountains where you could do sluicing, or areas in the desert as well. Now here's an area, obviously a mountain area, and you can see to the right of me there's some boulders or some cobbles that are stacked up there, and there's kind of a flat area in front of me. That flat area actually is a bedrock surface, and there was some decent gold that was taken along that bedrock surface and in this area. And some of the cobbles were tossed by the people who did that behind me in the gut of the stream where the water would flow during the time of the year when there was water. This is a good area to check with the metal detector. So if I were coming to this area, I would be checking that bedrock surface in case they missed anything. And then right at the edge where the dirt in front of me meets the bedrock, that's an area that they hadn't dug out yet. I would be checking that area carefully for gold. And I actually did get a couple little tiny nuggets in that zone where the bedrock meets the gravel that's sitting on top. Here's a nearby area. This is only 100 or so feet from the last photograph. The same kind of thing where my metal detector coil is actually bedrock, but right above that is gravel. And I got some nuggets at this area where the bedrock meets the gravel, where the gravel sits on top of the bedrock is a great place to check for gold. Now sometimes you get into places like this where the old-time miners, this is actually an old hydraulic mine in California, and all the ground surface in the foreground is bedrock. And so it all has a certain potential for checking with metal detectors. And you can sometimes see in places like this where old bedrock outcrops, and those, of course, are good places. And but actually, there's a wide area in these old hydraulic mines where there's potential for finding gold. Now, one of the signs that you should be able to read when you get out in the hills, either in desert areas or in mountain areas like this, is piles and piles of cobbles. You see, the old-time miners would uh, dig the gravel out and run it through their sluice boxes, but the cobbles, 8, 10 inches to a foot or two, they couldn't run that through their sluice box. It would just, it would just block up the sluice box and cause problems. So they would toss these cobbles into piles. And generally speaking, the piles are not a big source of gold, but occasionally in some places where they had significant gold and quartz specimens, the old-time miners would toss the cobbles out, and some of those cobbles, a small percentage normally, a very small percentage, would have significant free gold in them. And I know of people who found some pretty spectacular pieces if you're in the right old mining area, just in these cobbles. Now, sometimes between the cobbles, there are areas that are old bedrock that was not covered with cobbles. Usually the cobbles in a large way cover the bedrock, but sometimes there's areas of open bedrock, and they're good for detecting or working or crevicing. Now here's another area that the miners dug, and you can see some cobbles in the foreground, but you can also see dirt underneath the cobbles. And this is an area where they threw a few cobbles on top of the bedrock, and the bedrock was well weathered. And this dirt that the cobbles in the foreground are sitting on is actually weathered bedrock. And so by taking areas like this, you can carefully check them with your metal detector for crevices or other things in the weathered bedrock that the old-time miners might have missed. They can be really good for working in certain places. Sometimes you'll get stacks of cobbles behind a certain area like this. They had a couple big boulders and threw all their cobbles behind it, but in the foreground there's dirt and soil and bedrock that is well worth detecting. So this is another kind of area where they threw the cobbles behind a place, but in front of the place is interesting to check with your metal detector. Now here's an area where you can see in the background there's some cobbles. You can see some piles of cobbles here and there, but there were areas throughout this where there was dirt and weathered bedrock exposed, and this was a good area for metal detecting. It actually produced some very large nuggets in the early days. Here's another area with stacks of cobbles, and like I say, between the stacks of cobbles is where you want to work, or sometimes around the edges of the cobbles where the cobbles may be thin and you can move a few cobbles away and access some ground that was never worked previously by any other operators. Now, existing streams, in these ancient stream beds where the cobbles were, just like an existing stream, you can get gold depositing behind boulders, and you can see the water swirl around, and behind this boulder is an area of quiet ground. Here is a big boulder in a stream, and actually the guy who dredged in behind this boulder originally back 10 years or so, 12, 15 years ago maybe, back when dredging was legal in California, the guy actually got a 3-ounce nugget and several other large nuggets, half an ounce, quarter ounce, that sort of thing, out from in behind this boulder. And this boulder sits on the inside bend of a rich gold-bearing stream. So always keep your eyes when you come into a new area. If you're in a stream type environment, keep your eyes open for inside bends and big boulders like this. Also in a stream environment, keep your eye open for bedrock. Now here, The light colored bedrock is a very big contrast to the darker uh, gray and other toned sand and gravel. But this light colored rock, even though it doesn't look like most rocks, it is bedrock, and there will be gold at the surface of the bedrock where the gravel sits on top of it. Here's another type of bedrock where you have mostly bedrock and just a few rocks in between, and sometimes under or around these rocks can be the big boulders that you can see between the detectorist and where I'm standing to take the picture. Sometimes in and around those boulders can be really good, and just in crevices and cracks in the bedrock, because this is a type of bedrock that produces a lot of crevices and that sort of thing. So those can be good areas as well. Now, in the foreground to the left, there's a kind of a flat area next to the river, or next to the bed, because there's no water in it this time of year. There's some bedrock exposed there, and those are bench areas. And sometimes bench areas can be very good for prospectors. Now you can see with areas like this, you've got bedrock and you've got gravel sitting on top of it. This is an area where a river has cut down and left high and dry a gravel deposit. And where the gravel sits on the bedrock is where you're going to see the bulk of the gold concentrate. And this is a perfect example and shows well how this type of setup is created. Here's another area of gravel along an old riverbed that also is very productive for prospectors. This kind of bench gravel is very useful, and you should learn to recognize these benches when you're out in the field. Here's one that is actually just a little tiny one. You can see the dark gray bedrock in the foreground, but you can notice that sitting on top of it are rounded cobbles from the stream. There's actually a stream behind me in this picture. That's a small stream, but it does a stream and does cut down and does round boulders and round rocks and create round rocks, and then you'll see that this material can be deposited on top of the bedrock, and then the stream may cut a different way and leave that gravel stranded. And you should be able to recognize these as great places to check for any nuggets that may be present. You should get out there with your metal detector or take samples for dry washing. This is the kind of place that you're looking for. Now here's some old diggings that you can see very well across the way there. These are old placer diggings, and you can see some piles of rock down below the placer diggings, but these cuts on the far side of the stream here are actually old placer diggings that produced lots of gold in the early days, and they are the type of thing that you could recognize and then get out there and check very closely with your metal detector. It is, as we've been talking about, bench gravel. Now here's another type of thing that you should learn to recognize in the field, and this is an old timer workings where you can see the gravel that's off to the right there. Well, there's a little drainage that comes down here, and the old timers dug that drainage out and processed the material and took the sand and gravel away, but they threw their cobbles and their little gravel, the rock there, off to the side and pitched it to the right, and were able to work and take the gold out of the gut of this little stream. And so recognizing things like this as signs of old-time placer workers that came through here and mined the gold, and it can also give you a real hint as to where the gold might be in an area. In fact, anytime you see old-time habitations like this is the remains of an old miner's cabin. When you see stuff like this, it's always a good sign that there may be workings nearby. If the miners were doing well enough to establish some sort of permanent abode as opposed to just having a tent, if they were taking their time to build something out of stone, that means that they were getting something decent and wanted to stick around for a while. So these are a good sign and a good hint. Now, this is an interesting thing. One of the things that is important for prospectors is to know that old-time hard rock mine dumps sometimes can be very good for detecting. Now, most hard rock mines, unfortunately, have very fine gold that isn't really something that you're gonna, you know, be able to detect with a metal detector. You might be able to dry wash some of it, but the really fine gold like that isn't great for the detector. But some mines do have very good gold that's suitable for metal detecting. Now, look closely at this dump here. You'll notice that on one side, on the right side, the material is all gray kind of colored, whereas on the left, there's a much more iron-rich material. It's very common that the miners would purposefully segregate their materials. They would take the rock that's the country rock, the host rock for any vein or that sort of thing, and put it in one pile. And in this case, that's the bigger gray pile. Then they would put the ore, the material that they wanted to save, in a separate pile because they would hope someday maybe to ship this off to a custom mill to be processed and the values extracted from the material. So if you came on to something like this, you would want to focus your attention on the iron-rich pile, the iron pile uh, more over to the left, rather than the country rock pile on the right. And this gives you a good hint as to how you should process this type of working. And one of the things to remember just is this type of flat slabby rock like this that's shown in the picture here that's iron stained. This is a common host rock for a lot of types of gold deposits, including placers. And when you see this, you should recognize this as a favorable type of host or formation that you might want to check out with your metal detector or take samples of with your dry washer. And finally, I want to show you what you get if you're really successful. Now, a miner that I know got into some really good areas with his metal detector, and this is pounds and pounds of big chunks of gold that are highly valuable as collector's pieces, but there's pounds and pounds of gold metal here that that would really be quite a strike. And he was out here, and this is from the Arizona desert. It really was quite the find. So with that, I want to say I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you find it interesting. We'll have more coming. So also I want to mention my book, Fistful of Gold. If you have more interest in learning about how to find gold and be successful as a prospector, this is the source that you want to check out. Basically, my book is an encyclopedia of everything you need to know about prospecting, from panning, sluicing, metal detecting, dry washing, to geology of gold, and even how to stake a claim. It's basically everything you need to know about prospecting, and it's available now on Amazon. You just go to Amazon and look for Fistful of Gold by Chris Ralph, and I guarantee you'll find it. Also, I have my own website, and that's, of course, free. And for more free information, just go to nevadaoutbackgems.com/prospect/chrisprospect.htm. That's the URL for it, and it's got all kinds of information about prospecting and mining and the whole thing, everything you wanted to know, including some great history and locations of where you might want to prospect for gold. And finally, if you like this presentation and you want to learn more about finding your own gold, I promise that I've got quite a few more gold, silver, and gemstone videos coming that are on the way. A lot of exciting and interesting stuff, both in the form of live action videos as well as slide presentations. So be sure to click the subscribe button and the notification bell, and YouTube will let you know when I publish new stuff. And hit the like button as well, and feel free to comment or ask questions, and I promise to do my very best to answer any of your questions as best I can. So thanks a lot, and hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you again soon.